Vishvamatmagatam vyanjan Kutasto jagat ankuraha Svatijasa pibati vram Atma prasvapanam tamaha. Atma prasvapanam tamaha. Vishvamatmagatam vyanjan Kutasto jagat ankuraha Svatijasa pibati vram Atma prasvapanam tamaha. Vishvamatmagatam vyanjan Kutasto jagat ankuraha Svatejasa pibati vram Atma prasvapanam tamaha. Almost. Vaishnavis. Vishvamatmagatam vyanjan Kutasto jagadankuraha Svatejasa pibati vram Atma prasvapanam tamaha. Vishvamatmagatam vyanjan Kutasto jagat ankuraha Satejasa pibati vram Atma prasvapanam tamaha. Vishvam, the universe, Atmagatam, contained within himself, Vyanjan, manifesting, Kutastaha, unchangeable, Jagat Ankuraha, the root of all cosmic manifestations, Svatejasa, by its own effulgence, Apibat, swallowed, Tivram, dense, Atma Prasvapanam, which had covered the Mahat Tattva, Tamaha, darkness. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Thus, after manifesting variegatedness, the effulgent Mahatattva, which contains all the universes within itself, which is the root of all cosmic manifestations, and which is not destroyed at the time of annihilation, swallows the darkness that covered the effulgence at the time of dissolution. So please repeat. Thus, after manifesting variegatedness, the effulgent Mahatattva, which contains all the universes within itself, which is the root of all cosmic manifestations, and which is not destroyed at the time of annihilation, swallows the darkness that covered the effulgence at the time of dissolution. Purport. Since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is ever existing, all blissful and full of knowledge, his different energies are also ever existing in the dormant stage. Thus, when the Mahatattva was created, it manifested the material ego and swallowed up the darkness which covered the cosmic manifestation at the time of dissolution. This idea can be further explained. A person at night remains inactive, covered by the darkness of night. But when he is awakened in the morning, the covering of night, or the forgetfulness of the sleeping state, disappears. Similarly, when the Mahatattva appears after the night of dissolution, the effulgence is manifested to exhibit the variegatedness of this material world. Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Om Agyanatimanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Kshakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manubhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. A correction. Actually, I believe, this is my speculation, that Nishingadev, if I got a little mercy from Nishingadev during my visit here, he showed me just how desperate I am for recognition, for fame, because, what Prabhupada says in the I think in the purport to the 13th canto, chapter of the Gita, like he defines humility as one who is not eager to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. And so somehow it was arranged that just days and days and days went by, and I wasn't, asked to give the Bhagavatam class, even though Govinda Dev Prabhu had told me that, when you come, you can give classes. And so it became really, really hard on my false ego. and so finally, after some days, I was like, I have to, I have to deal with this injustice. And then so I spoke to Nishinga, Advaita Nishinga Prabhu, and so now I feel like maybe, not that Krishna is much in, cares about a useless soul's life, but maybe he's making fun now. Like, okay, you really wanted to, be in the spotlight? Well, here, 3 days in a row now. Anyway. It was last moment, so when I was thinking, okay, what am I going to speak about? What am I going to speak about? And this verse talks about the energies of the Lord. And so I came up with this theme, this main theme, and that is that by bhakti, if we engage in bhakti, if we engage in devotional service, we will realize that behind this entire cosmic engineering, ultimately, there's a teenage couple who's dancing. Beyond the entire cosmic manifestations and all the energies and all the Mahatattva and all the things that is being described here, if we engage in bhakti, we'll realize that at the root of all of that, there's a divine couple, a teenage divine couple. I was also thinking, okay, what am I going to say first? And I remembered when I was a brahmachari distributing Srila Prabhupada's books in the Los Angeles airport, I was a big fan of a band called Shelter. Maybe you Prabhus who are a little older have heard of it. Have you, Bashar Prabhu? From Raghunath, right? The current Raghunath Prabhu, who's the head of the Wisdom of the Sages extraordinary preaching project podcast. Before that, he was part of a hardcore punk rock band in the 1990s that toured all over the world, but mostly in America, and that had significant impact on the youth of America. And so they had this album that came out called Beyond Planet Earth. And I remember it was 1997, I'm at the Los Angeles airport, and it was so hard to distribute books there because people were so passionate, so uninterested, and so rushed to go catch their flight, or after coming from a flight, the last thing they want is some religious proselytizer trying to tell them about God, It's the last thing on their mind. And so it was really difficult with all these announcements. Gate number 23, Delta Airlines, boarding in 5 minutes, and people walking. And so I had this cassette. It was like actually it was CD time. I had this CD of this album by Shelter, and there was this one song called Beyond Planet Earth. And I want to play you just 10 seconds of it, not more, 10 seconds of it, because I think it's very apropos. And I want to, give a homage. That the French word homage means, homage to, a great poet or a great writer or someone that you really admire. And I really do admire those devotees. So this song, the chorus is, infinitely small, we think we can understand it. Go out and stand tall, call their bluff. Like when you're playing cards and someone has a bad hand, but they bluff, they make you pretend that they have a really good hand. So you call their bluff. Like, no, show me your card. Like, I don't believe you have a good hand. So that's called call their bluff. So, go out and stand tall, call their bluff. There's more beyond this planet Earth. And the verse that I just want to play, which refers to this, it goes like this. The mystics of ancient time. The mystics knew the subtle view. And modern man, well, he's got no clue. And on my back I stare through the cold night air as the moon and stars witness our egocentricity. So here's I don't know if there was ever a passage from Shelter's song played at a Srimad Bhagavatam class in Srimad, but this is in line with the Siddhanta of the class. It's just a few seconds. So it goes like this. So remember the lyrics. Mystics knew the subtle view, modern man, he's got no clue, and on my back I stare through the cold night air as the moon and stars witness our egocentricity. Infinitely small, we think we can understand it. Go out and stand tall, call their bluff, there's more beyond this planet Earth. There's more beyond this planet Earth. This is the beauty of Yukta Vairagya. We can use everything in Krishna's service, in the service of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in the service of the preaching mission of Lord Chaitanya. So we've all been there, I think. Most of us have stood on the grass, looked up at the sky, and unless maybe you were born into a devotee family and you believe from the beginning that, okay, maybe there's a God and there's Krishna, many people don't really, even devotees who are not fully convinced, and that includes a lot of children who are, still kind of, are not, haven't embraced the process of bhakti yoga yet, sit on their backs and look at the sky and wonder, what's beyond? And the Bhagavatam comes to the rescue. The Bhagavatam comes to the rescue and gives a very, very sophisticated, theistic explanation of the cosmos. Nishingadev ki jai. might as well do a little publicity for this book. Someone hearing on YouTube, or some of you here, this book here is a book by Bhaktivinoda Thakur called the Sri Bhagavatarka Marichi Mala, a garland of rays from the sun-like Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's actually, if there's anything I prepared for the class today, it's thanks to this quick book. The story behind this is really cool, and I think there should be a German edition of it. He says, I'll read to you real quick. Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself says, "When I was relishing Srimad Bhagavatam one day, Sri Swarup Damodar Prabhu." Now, who is Swarup Damodar Prabhu? The senior devotees know. Swarup Damodar, one of the very close associates of Lord Chaitanya, right? So one of the very close associates of Lord Chaitanya, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, appeared in my realization and instructed me, quote, so this is Swarup Damodar, who was actually a very personal servant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Chaitanya Charitamrita says. So he says, by the order of Mahaprabhu, arrange the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam under the categories of Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. Then, by the mercy of Srimad Mahaprabhu, this book will be accepted in the assembly of Vaishnavas as a book for daily recitation. By that inspiration only, this fallen servant Bhaktivinoda compiled this book. So this is a book which supposedly, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Swarup Damodar told him, you compile basically the best of. You have the best of the Beatles, or best of whatever, Red Hot Chili Peppers, etc., etc. So this is the best of the Bhagavatam, out of the 14 or 18,000 verses, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And then there's all these waves, and one of them is called the science of the Lord's energies. The science of the Lord's energies. Fifth wave, fifth ray. And it's just these select best of verses. So I looked in here, because here we're talking, the Bhagavatam here, this passage, Kardama Muni talks about the Lord's energies, how this cosmic world, beyond planet Earth, I would listen to it, I was like, yeah. So beyond planet Earth, how it's all arranged according to the Bhagavatam. So I found a few cool verses that I want to, share with you on this topic, okay? And there's a lot of specific details like pradhan and mahatattva, and it gets super, super technical. And some devotees, are very expert in this third canto and the movement of the living entities, and can really just give very, very broken down explanations. I can't, So we're just going to stick to general principles here, and ultimately go to the point that, even these general principles ultimately are only sort of the facade almost to the real point, which is Radha Krishna, which is a personal God, and bhakti, a relationship between the soul and God. That's the ultimate consideration, right? So, a few things. First of all, the Bhagavatam seems to repeat again and again that God, or Krishna, Vishnu, has unlimited potencies, unlimited power to create, to manage, and so on. And this entire cosmic manifestation is happening only by his energies, not even him personally. It's by his energies only. There's this famous verse from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad that Prabhupada used to quote a lot. Parasya Shaktir Vividaya Shruyate Svabhaviki Jnana Bala Kriya Cha. The Supreme Lord has multi-potencies which act so perfectly that all consciousness, strength, and activity are being directed solely by his will. So this verse states that, God just, God wants creation to take place, or wants something, and it just happens, right? Including all the sophisticated elements that go from one, subtle element to the more gross element, and air and fire and the sense of touch. And the Govinda Dev explained that nicely a few weeks ago. And it's super sophisticated, super technical, a lot more technical than the Lord created in 7 days. And I don't want to make fun of, the biblical account of creation, but The Bhagavatam has just a much more sophisticated, maybe we're wrong, maybe it's not, maybe the Bible is right and we're mistaken with the Bhagavatam, who knows. But at least in terms of objective sophistication, the Bhagavatam really trumps, all other scriptures, I would say, in terms of description of, creation story. Now maybe, sophistication is not necessarily a qualification to be better, but at least we are here and we are hearing from the Bhagavatam, so we have some appreciation of the sophistication of the Bhagavatam. So here's this verse. Let me give you this other one from 4th Canto, chapter 11, verse 18, where Manu, the father of mankind, he says, same thing. He says, Karotyakartaiva nihantya hanta cheshta vibhumna kalu durvibhavya. So he's speaking about Krishna. He's saying, it appears that he is acting, but he is not the actor. He is killing, but he is not the killer. Thus, it is understood that only by his inconceivable power is everything happening. So again, this theme that everything's happening by the Shakti of the Lord. Right. Let me read you another one. This is from the 11th Canto, chapter 4, verse 2, where the sage Drumila, he says, and I won't read the Sanskrit, I'll just read the English. He says, anyone trying to enumerate or describe fully the unlimited qualities of the unlimited Supreme Lord has the intelligence of a foolish child. Even if a great genius could somehow or other, after a time-consuming endeavor, count all the particles of dust on the surface of the earth, such a genius could never count the attractive qualities of the personality of Godhead, who is the reservoir of all potencies. So again, this idea that Krishna is the source of all potencies, and it's by these potencies that this material world is created, with all its, German engineering to the to the infinite degree. You take German engineering and you add the one of Krishna to it, and you get the Mahatattva and the Pradhan and so on. Now, what's really interesting especially for Vaishnavas, is that on the one hand, it's in God. You have this. You have a description where you have in the same personality, on the one side, this just infinitely powerful, infinitely intelligent supreme being who just by his own shaktis is able to orchestrate the creation, the maintenance of not just one, right? But we hear there's like a bag of mustard seeds, and you take one mustard seed, that's one universe, right? And he's able to do that, no problem, right? And at the same time, simultaneously, we have these descriptions of God who, in a more intimate sense, is a teenage boy. He's a teenage boy who, leaves the management of the world to his avatar, to his expansion, Vishnu, and then even Vishnu just does it by his potencies. And the 10th canto describes that Supreme Lord, in his most intimate being, namely what he is, namely a little cowherd boy, Govinda, Shyamasundar, he's just enjoying Leela. He's just enjoying Leela on the bank of a river and playing with cows and going out to have with his friends, and sometimes, at least on planet Earth, what he's here, killing some demons occasionally, but even that's fun, and just enjoying with the cowherd damsels, with his father and his mother, and that dimension of the Lord is no longer under the influence of what's called Mahamaya, but Yogamaya, right? The difference between Mahamaya and Yogamaya. So Mahamaya is this Maya that covers the soul, covers us from understanding God at all, makes us identify with our false identity and so on, and it's also sort of related to the whole cosmic manifestation. But in that intimate realm of divinity, you have God who manifests as Yogamaya. And with that, we hear that the souls, the intimate souls surrounding that Lord, in that most intimate sense of his being, they are also covered by illusion, but they forget that he's God. It's another type of illusion. There's so much intimacy, so much personal relationships and intimacy, yeah, that's the word, that they, by Krishna's arrangement, forget that he is God. And even then, sometimes when Krishna shows his divinity once in a while, Yogamaya is so powerful that even the souls forget. They don't understand. Or maybe then at that point Krishna takes away that Yogamaya. We have two examples. One is when Yashoda looks into the mouth of Krishna, and then she's like, and then Krishna shows her, right, the whole universes and planet Earth, and her looking into the mouth of Krishna, and she's like, I don't understand here. And then, he takes that away, and the milk is boiling, And another example, which I like a lot, is told by one of the Goswamis. I forget which one, but it's in one of the Goswami literature, where Krishna and his cowherd friends divided into groups, as they often do, the Bhagavatam says, and they had a fight, like a mock fight, as they often do. And Krishna lost. And in this particular instance, the opposing team really started making fun of Krishna. Like, look at you, whatever. I mean, I'm just speculating, but I'm making fun, so we can imagine, you're so this or you're so that. And the Goswamis in this instance say that Krishna became hurt. Sometimes you see a child who gets offended by another child, and he becomes red and he becomes angry, wants to take revenge. So that's what happened, supposedly, according to the text. And Krishna and so he wanted revenge. So what he did by his, he's all powerful. So all of a sudden the earth that was flat became vertical. And everything, the trees, the houses, the cows, everything started falling down, and including the cowherd boys. And as they're just falling down, towards an infinite abyss, they're screaming, help Krishna, And then after scaring them a little bit like that, then Krishna re-puts the face of the earth horizontal. But then what's interesting is that, the cowherd boys, they get back, and then they say, yeah, you're a pretty good magician, Krishna. You're a pretty good magician. Yogamaya is so strong that in spite of Krishna showing just you want me to show you who I really am? And then they experience still that they can't conceive that this Krishna, he's God, Okay, yeah, that was a pretty good trick, So whether it's Krishna in his, amazing universal dimension, or whether it's Krishna, the intimate cowherd boy, the Bhagavatam tells us that he cannot be understood by our blunt material senses and our mind. That's just, you can't understand God through your mental speculation, through your own endeavors. The endeavor has to be there, but it's not by mental speculation that God can be understood. Queen Kunti, in the 8th canto, first canto, chapter 8, verse 19, she has this famous verse, right, where she compares Krishna to an actor behind a stage. She says, being beyond the range of limited sense, that means you're beyond sense perception, beyond being that, you are the eternally irreproachable factor covered by the curtain of deluding energy. In this case, we're talking Mahamaya again. You are invisible to the foolish observer, exactly as an actor dressed as a player is not recognized. So an actor comes on stage, wow, who is that? And then you don't recognize it. Oh, that's, whatever, that's Jim, or that's Maria, because he's so well disguised. So in a similar way, Queen Kunti says that Krishna or God cannot be understood by material sense perception. Another famous verse that One of my Shiksha gurus, Brikupati Prabhu, used to quote a lot, or quotes a lot. Atak Shri Krishna Nam Adi Na Bhavet Grayam Indriyai Sevon Mukhe Hi Jivado Swayam Eva Spuratyada. Atak Shri Krishna, so Krishna, Nam, his name, Adi, etc. So that means including even, this whole creation and how it's made up. What to speak of, that most confidential part of the spiritual world and the intimate dealings between God and his eternal associates. That cannot be understood by the blunt material senses. Na grayam indriyai. Indriya means the senses, right? Atak Shri Krishna Namadi na bhavet grayam indriyai. But, and here we go into the second part of this class, this next theme is this theme of bhakti as the means to understand God. Atak Shri Krishna Namadi na bhavet grayam indriyai. But sevon muke hi jivado Swayam eva sfuratyada. Seva, we all know what that is. Service. Sevon hi, what is it? Atak Shri Krishna Namadi na bhavet gramendriya. Sevon muke hi jivado. By engaging the senses, beginning with what? It's funny because he mentions the word, that verse talks and says the word, the tongue, jiva, like we sing every day, sharira vijaja jandriya daika, jive file, the jiva. So here the same word, jiva. So by the process of seva, beginning with the tongue, starting with the tongue, and therefore we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, try to speak about Krishna, and we honor Prasadam. Prasadam ki jai. So by that process, Shastra says, then eva sfuratyada, then God is revealed. Then God is actually revealed. Right? So it's like a grace. Like you can't, Led Zeppelin used to sing, right? Knocking on heaven's door. Right? Bob Dylan took that song again. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Like you can knock all you want, but unless from inside someone opens the door, it's not going to be opened. Right? We spoke about Druta Karma the other day, and Druta Karma Prabhu uses this nice analogy, I think, of an online computer program, and you can only access higher and higher levels of that software, for example, only if you have the code given to you from the code master or the designer or someone who's, let's say, on the other side. So similarly, our scriptures say that, that Supreme Lord can be understood only by a certain process, and that process is bhakti. And if that's not enough, Krishna confirms that in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Right? Bhaktyamam abhijanati yavanyasyasmi tatvataha tatomam tatvato gyatva vishate tad anantaram. Right? One can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by, and Prabhupada liked to translate the word bhakti as devotional service. It's interesting to note, because the word bhakti generally means, devotion, love for God, but Prabhupada defines, bhakti many times as devotional service, like, active yukta vairagya service. Only by devotional service, and when one understands me, then he can enter into the kingdom of God, right? So, you can understand God, tattvataha, in truth, according to tattva, according to ontological category, only by bhakti, and not by speculating. I remember my father, Krishna bless him, he had a really cool death, like when he passed away. Not that I'm great at all, but a blind uncle is better than no uncle. So there was an aspiring devotee when he was dying, chanting right into his ear, and he had some shaligrams next to his face, and he had some tulsi bead on his neck, and he hadn't. The only thing that was going into his system was charnamrita from my shaligrams for the last 3 days, because he couldn't swallow anymore, so he was basically not eating or drinking anymore. And he passed away hearing the holy name and looking right at me. It was a really beautiful experience. I hope I have a death even similar to that. But my point is, And with all the service, he helped me financially. I'm saying this because I'm going to sort of criticize my father here, so I don't want to sound like an ungrateful son, So, but I remember, like, he speculated. Like, he was intelligent, he liked to read, so he had these books, like The God Delusion, when it came out, Richard Dawkins, I think, and then A Brief History of Time by this other scientist, the one who was, like, paraplegic. And just, he was just basically an agnostic leaning towards atheism, and just, reading book after book after book after book about, the universe and and but he just, couldn't really get to stop speculating and accept God. It's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do, and without the mercy of the Vaishnavas, it's really hard. I remember he came to visit me in Los Angeles once, and in ISKCON Los Angeles, there's the whole apartment where Prabhupada stayed many, many, many months, and everything's like exactly how it was before. With the blue and gold wall painting and Prabhupada's bed, and so many, like here you have a few back there of Prabhupada's relics, but there, like, so many are there, and including his slippers that he wore. And I remember where I was like, come on, Dad. So I took him up there, and at one point I took Prabhupada's slipper, and I tapped it on his head, and I said, the scriptures say that unless you get the dust of a pure devotee, you can't understand God. And he understood theoretically, he smiled, he kind of chuckled. But, unless you adopt a devotional attitude, an attitude of submissiveness, not that you become stupid and become a zombie and you join a cult, and we've seen a lot of that type of behavior, but at the heart you do submit yourself to the Lord. Here's one more verse, super famous, 10th canto. Especially the last two lines, Janati Tattvam Bhagavan Mahimno Nachanya Eko Pichiram Vichinvam. Here it says, my Lord, if one is favored even by a slight trace of the mercy of your lotus feet, or the mercy of the pure devotee, as Prahlad Maharaj says that in the 7th canto also, unless they get the dust, right, and I just quoted that verse. So by the Lord or the Lord's devotee, same thing. Unless one is favored even by a slight trace of the mercy of your lotus feet, unless that, or if one is, then he can understand the greatness of your personality. But those who speculate to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead are unable to know you, even though they continue to study the Vedas for many, many years. And one last verse to confirm this point again about bhakti as the means. Krishna says, Bahunam janmanam ante gyanavam mam prapadyante vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sudurlabha. After many births and deaths, one who is gyanavan, one who is actually in knowledge, he takes shelter of me, Krishna says. As opposed to, some people, okay, fine, when I'm with the Vaishnavas, I'll chant Vishnu's name, but then this is more like towards Hindus from India, but okay, but then I'll, ultimately, you see, if someone is shopping from one shop to another, so to speak, that means fundamentally that person is not willing or ready or has understood or doesn't agree that ultimately there's one Supreme Lord, a personal being, Vishnu or Krishna. Yeah, it's like if you're still shopping around and go, okay, well, one in and out, and I. Not to say that we disrespect the devas, but as Vaishnavas, we see, this is small parenthesis, sorry, we see the devatas as great servants of Vishnu, but they're not independent. But we see them as servants, so we give all the respect. Like for example, in South India, the first ISKCON devotees, they made a big mistake in preaching, because like in Tamil Nadu, Madras area, they were telling people, demigod worship is useless. Take off your, the deity of Shiva from your altar, and we got a really bad reputation. A more mature approach would have been to say, look, if you accept Vaishnav Siddhanta, then you can worship Shiva, but see him as, Yata Vaishnavanam Shambhu, as the greatest servant of Vishnu, right? So if you're very respectful to all the devatas, while seeing them not as independent but as servants in the royal court of the Supreme Emperor, then no problem. But if you're still operating theologically in a paradigm where all the gods are basically independent and we worship all the gods, and ultimately it doesn't matter if we worship all the gods, what's implied is that ultimately there is just one, Brahman. It's Advaita Vedanta. It's basically impersonalism. Advaita Vedanta, technically speaking, in its most recent manifestation. Everything is one. We are God. And so it doesn't matter, worship. And so if one wants to go that path, fine, but at the door of, of Shri Vaishnavism, of Chaitanya Vaishnavism, no. Here we accept Krishna as supreme, and we try to follow his teaching, to surrender to him. Eka. Respecting the devatas, but the full surrender comes to Krishna ultimately. And then again, in this verse that I quoted, he says, right, Bahunam Janmanam, after many janma, one who is actually in knowledge, Gyanavan, one who has knowledge, right? What does he do? He doesn't go everywhere to every temple. I mean, he can, but deep down in his heart, he accepts what? Vasudeva Sarvamiti. That Vasudeva, or Krishna, is everything. And not everything in the sense of, a pantheism where, this microphone is Krishna and therefore, no, in a personal sense. Vasudeva, the person, the son of Vasudeva and Devaki, he is supreme. Such a great soul is very rare. So we're into Bhakti Vedanta, Prabhus. The knowledge, the Vedanta ends with Bhakti. And our favorite example is the gopis, right? The gopis don't know anything about, they're illiterate, the Shastra says, but they're considered to be the greatest Vaishnavis. Why? Because they have the greatest Bhakti for Krishna. And so they understand ultimately what to speak of understanding, the pradhan and the three modes of nature and how all that engineering functions. They're able to control God, by their love, so much that we hear Krishna never leaves Vrindavan, for example. Why? Because one explanation, in my humble explanation, is that the devotees of Vrindavan love Krishna so much that he is ever, how do you say, hooked, tied by that love. So, Prabhus, you are in a good place theologically, and there's really nothing to tell you. Just continue chanting Hare Krishna, continuing what you're doing now already, which is you're sincerely serving Krishna, you're sincerely serving your spiritual master, you're sincerely serving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Sankirtan mission. And you're doing that gloriously in all your different natural inclinations. You're engaging all your talents in Krishna service, you're sacrificing your time to get up in the morning, to chant those rounds, to stay clean, to offer your food to Krishna. You're already doing that. You're engaged in the process of bhakti yoga. And by that process, you should be convinced that not only, as a side feature, you'll basically get how the mechanism of this universe works. And if you're really interested, you can, again, like I said the other day, you can join the Bhaktivedanta Institute and, go all out and write PhDs about the pradhan and the parabhyoma, whatever, the mahatattva. But overall, just continue chanting the holy name, continue reading the Bhagavatam, continue associating with devotees, and if you continue doing that, then ultimately, as our scriptures say, you'll realize that divine little teenage couple, that beyond the whole Maya and the modes and karma and all that, they're just like dancing, a young couple dancing, the rasa dance, right? Any questions or comments or corrections or additions? Okay, then let me finish with one quote from Prabhupada that Garuda Prabhu, those of you who know him, sent me the other day. This is Prabhupada saying, and you know, we can all relate to this, because this is our goal, this is where we want to go ultimately. Krishna is eternal, his pastimes are eternal. Just join with Krishna, his rasa dance, his play with cowherd boys, his dealings with his father and mother in Vrindavan. So this movement is to join Krishna's pastimes. So we can just continue doing what we're doing and have faith that if we just continue what we're doing, we're going to join Krishna's pastimes in this life, a little bit, and hopefully, you know, whenever Krishna wants, and good chances after we leave our bodies. And while we're here, we can try to help others to take their first or fifth or 100th or 1000th step towards Krishna also. Jai. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Prahlad Nrsimhadeva ki jai.